Hey guys, how's it going? So I really only want to get two things accomplished out here this afternoon. First of all, we are going to tackle this big mess of a grass I've got going on. I mean, look at this thing. It's over the sidewalk. It's called a Miscanthus cabaret. They get enormous, clearly. 3 to 5 feet wide at the base, 6 to 8 feet tall, if they're staked up properly. Look at this. I always, every year, mean to preventatively stake it up so it doesn't flop, and I forget every time. So that's the first thing we're gonna tackle, and then second, I would like to get some herbs harvested. So sage, rosemary, thyme, basil, stevia, parsley, there's probably more I'm forgetting, but I would like to get them drying. Gardener Supply recently sent out one of their collapsible herb drying racks. I thought it'd be fun to kind of try it out. So I think that's gonna be the order of this afternoon. All right, so let's just get right after the project after just a quick overview of what's going on up here. There was an evergreen right here that did not survive, so that has been removed, and I haven't made a decision about what I want to put in there next. Maybe another evergreen that doesn't get very big, maybe like a really small crabapple I think would be pretty. It is a very full sun area, so I have to keep that in mind. But the At Last roses are looking so beautiful. There's some 9 barks, I think those are ginger wine. And then of course we've got the limelight hydrangeas. This one is newer than the other one, so it hasn't quite caught up in height yet. I'm thinking next year though, that it just might make it, so that we have that hydrangea interest on both sides. We've got some Green Mountain boxwood topiaries in the urns. Supertunia mulberry charm that still looks pretty good. Lemon coral sedum. The Angelonia called Angel Face Steel Blue with lemon coral. We ended up pulling out the Supertunia mulberry charm that was up here. It was just getting too much water, which isn't that crazy that the lemon coral sedum can handle it, but those Supertunias just were not loving it so much. I should have probably changed into something other than a sweatshirt. It's so cold in the mornings now that I always wear a sweatshirt in the morning, and then usually by afternoon I have to take a layer off or change so that I'm not so warm, but I don't think these projects are going to take too long. So I think this is how we're going to go about the staking. I'm actually going to, I mean business this time. That grass is really heavy. I've tried bamboo stakes, wood stakes. I'm going to go ahead and use a T-post, so I'm going to ask Erin to come out and install that for me right behind the grass. And then I'm going to tie up the grass in layers and sections up to the T-post. And then these are my things for herb drying. So this is the herb drying rack. I'm going to harvest into this basket, and I've got my Felco somewhere. Hey, can you come help me with that stake? Okay, thanks. All right, got my supplies out, and Aaron is on his way. I think we just need one steak. I almost said stank. That's how I feel about this project right now. That T-post is a little bent. It's one of the ones I got out of my parents' barn. Right in there somewhere would work great, Aaron. Okay. Right where you've got it. As long as there's no drip there. Is there a drip there?
No, not right here.
You sure? Under the mulch?
Is this a trick?
No. It's just that usually when we do a project, we hit every water line imaginable. There you go. That is heavy.
All right, here we go.
How does that feel sturdiness wise?
A little more.
Okay. 2 more tamps. And by 2, you did 4. That's perfect.
I go above and beyond for you.
Oh, baloney. Okay, so the stake is in the ground. What I'm going to attempt to do is tie this up in layers. So instead of just trying to get a piece of twine all the way around this whole thing, I mean, that would be really hard and heavy for me to manage. So I think I'll actually get a better shape if I do like a little section in the center and tie it off, and then do the next section around that one and tie it off, and so forth until I make it to the outer rung. Now this is just a theory. We're gonna test it out here. And I typically use something called black tree rope. I think that's what it's called. That's like a soft black colored rope, but it's really gentle on plants. It doesn't cut into anything. So when I'm staking up trees and doing that sort of thing, that's what I use. But today I'm just using regular jute twine because this grass will be cut back this fall, because these tall grasses, they don't last through a winter here. I mean, we get one heavy snowfall and they'll be flat on the ground and a huge mess by spring, but we still have a month or two left of fall where I still want to enjoy this grass. So I think it is worth staking up and possibly like painting that T-post and just leaving it there so that every year it's right where it needs to be, so I can stake this thing up before the flop happens. So here we go. All done. And this is gonna certainly make it easier to navigate the sidewalk. And it would probably look a lot better, like a lot more shapely around the bottom part had I preventatively staked and let it grow naturally rather than bunching it up and tying it. But I mean, it is a heck of a lot better than it just was. And it was like so flopped over that it was over the top of this 9 bark and like pushing it down on top of this rose. This rose didn't grow very well because the whole side of it, right here you can see, was completely shrouded by that grass. So yeah, that makes me very happy. And now I can tuck something in right there, possibly, or not. Maybe I can just leave it open. I do need to come bring the blower up and clean the sidewalk, but that is a lot better. Let me show you from this view over here, like over the top of the roses. Look at that. And you can see the whole sidewalk all the way over. Maybe it wasn't the best placement for that grass, but I don't know. I think if I could just stake it and remember to do that, or even divide it this next year in the early spring, that might be a good idea too, just to kind of thin it out, make it a little thinner. I definitely do need something taller right here though, to kind of balance this whole section out. One of these days. Okay, so now we're gonna go harvest some herbs, and it's really interesting. I was kind of looking around online just to see what all the different schools of thought were when it pertains to harvesting and drying herbs, and it seems like there's a lot of information, and I feel like sometimes that can be a bad thing, because if you're unsure who to trust and what to do, sometimes you feel like, oh, I better not even try it because I'm afraid I'm gonna do it wrong. And so today I'm gonna do a lot of things differently than where you'll read it online, and we're just gonna experiment, because that's kind of my philosophy. Like, I will try a whole bunch of different methods and find out what works best for me. And it will really depend on your climate too. Like, some people swear by air drying herbs, and that is it. Like, not using the oven because that apparently burns up a lot of the essential oils, or not using a dehydrator for whatever reason. But if you live in a really high humidity climate, I can see where that wouldn't work. If you're air drying and you can't really get them dried out all the way, you could be dealing with mold, and it may be not worth your time. So maybe dehydrator drying or oven drying works best for you. So it's just one of those things. There's also some herbs that tend to dry better by like air drying. So sage and rosemary, thyme, oregano, trying to think of what other ones I've dried. Lavender air dries really well. Rosemary has dried pretty well for me. Did I already say rosemary? And then there are some herbs that have a higher moisture content, like basil, cilantro, chives, lemongrass, that tend to, well, some people say don't even dry those herbs. Like, you should just chop them up and freeze them. Like, put them in an ice cube tray, fill it up with water, like really pack it full, and then just fill it up just to where it covers the herbs with water, and then freeze them and put them in a Ziploc bag once they've solidified. And then you can pop them out and they're fresh whenever you want. Super easy way to do it, honestly. And then some people say air drying is fine. So I think there again, it just depends on your experience. So today I'm just gonna harvest a whole bunch of everything, and we're just gonna line it up in this herb drying rack, and we're gonna try to air dry. We are a very dry climate, so I think I can get away with that with even the high moisture content herbs, but we'll see. So I'm gonna head out to the new cut flower garden first, because I do have parsley and basil out there, and that's where we're gonna start. Oop, I left a bucket out. Look at this, you guys. Isn't that just so happy? All the color out here. I've enjoyed it so much. And the poor sunflowers after the windstorms last weekend. So all of this stuff here are the things I seeded in July. So we've got the flowers here in the first section. My poor cucumbers just got beat to death in the wind, but they still have cucumbers on them. So they're still producing. And then in that batch of stuff, I've got basil, cilantro, and parsley. So I've got some basil right here that hasn't flowered yet, which is perfect. We've got cilantro, which is already starting to bolt. I don't typically ever use dried cilantro, so I'm just gonna leave it. And then parsley is over here, and we'll grab some of that. So the best herbs to gather are ones that haven't flowered yet, because I guess the essential oils are more concentrated before that happens. And it's also a good idea to harvest early in the morning after the dew has dried. You don't want to harvest them when they still have dew, because then it's harder for them to dry out. But you don't want to do it really late in the day when it's been really sunny. We're early afternoon right now, and it's very cloudy, not cloudy, smoky. So we haven't really had a whole lot of full sun, so I think I'm still okay. And see, this is why I want to get out here and do it. See this right here? See that that was like cold damage. We had 2 nights last week where it got down to 39, and it kind of took a few of the leaves, made them look like this, which is not a big deal. I'll make sure to pick these off. We won't dry these, but it's kind of perfect stage to get some of these harvested and dried. Oh, it smells so good. All right, let's get some flat leaf Italian parsley next. You know, I really should harvest some of these calendula flowers too while I'm out here. Doesn't that look so pretty so far? Now I'm gonna head back toward the greenhouse where we've got the cocktail garden. I'll give you a look at that. It's looking a little bit weary toward, you know, this time of year, but I've got quite a number of herbs in there that we can harvest. And that looks like a really good start. Even more color, even just since yesterday with the dahlias. They're just starting to bloom. It's so pretty. All of these poor sunflowers, they're all leaning this way. Most of which, like you can see some that have completely fallen over. And the ones in the center, I mean, they're doing all right. They're hanging in there. But boy, those winds really did a number on my corn too. So sad. You know what wasn't fazed by the wind though? This container. Out in the middle of nowhere. Not buffered by anything. Those plants are still rocking. You know what, before I start harvesting, I'm gonna go ahead and hang this up in the greenhouse. That's not where it's gonna stay. I'm gonna take it inside, but I wanna be able to unload this so I have room. Got an S-hook here. I'm just gonna hang it from this beam. So this is what the Stack It herb drying rack looks like. I've never used one before, but it intrigued me. So 6 different layers right there, all of which can be accessed by one of these flaps. Hold on, let me get it open. Gotta use both hands. So right there, and see it's all this kind of like fine weave mesh, and you can lay your leaves out or flowers or whatever you're drying in there. I don't think you could use it for heavy stuff though. Like if you put potatoes, I saw a couple questions about potatoes or garlic. I mean, maybe if you did a fine layer of garlic, that's not too heavy, but I think it would want to weigh down toward the center. I think this is more suitable for leaves and flowers that don't have that extra bulky weight. But this way you can dry a whole bunch of different stuff with lots of room, and you keep them separate. So now I'm gonna load up a couple of these layers and see how it looks. By the way, Aaron parked his tractor right here. Not real sure why. Right in front of the greenhouse. And this is where we're going next, cocktail garden. All right, so here's what we've got so far. I put calendula in here. I didn't get too many of those, so I have room to put something else on this side. Then in this level, I have the parsley, and I do need to spread it out. I mean, you ideally want it in as thin of a layer as possible, especially if you have a lot of moisture in your air. This will be dried out though in less than a week here. And then basil right down here. And again, I will remove any of these that look bad, and you could take the time at this point to remove all the leaves from the stems before you set them in here to dry, but I find it pretty easy to do right after. All right, so here is the cocktail garden. I kind of let it get away from me a couple of times, especially with the Amazel basil. It got so huge, I had to trim it hard 3 different times because it got to a point where it was like going over the top of these strawberries. These are the Buried Treasure Red. In fact, I'm gonna try one. That looks good. Oh, yum. Then there's an amethyst basil that I planted in here for color. This one doesn't look so great. This is typically how it looks for me this time of year, but I might harvest, like that looks pretty good. Nice and fresh. And I'll harvest a few of those to dry. I had a good-hearted tomato right here, which it started to get like yellowy leaves. It's been producing like a beast. So I just came through like a couple days ago and cleaned that up, but honestly, we don't have very much longer to enjoy those. There's a rosemary right here. Stevia, it's grown really beautifully. On this side, there's a hot and heavy pepper, which also has been bearing like crazy. I haven't been able to keep up. There is a tricolor sage right there, and thyme. So I'm gonna cut a few of these things, and then I have 1 pot of mint. I wanna grab a handful of that as well. Look at that beautiful harvest just from that 1 container, and most of the herbs are still left. I mean, I just took a little bit because honestly, like rosemary, sage, and thyme, I don't use an enormous amount. It takes me a long time just because they're such strong herbs, especially the sage. I'm not like a huge sage fan, so like this is more than I will actually need. But I think it'll be fun to experiment with this stevia right here, and then I've got a few little fresh tops of the amethyst basil. So let's go get these put in the drying rack. Looks like my mint is blooming. Oh well, we're gonna harvest some anyway. That is such a beautiful container of mint. I didn't want to wreck the aesthetic, so I went ahead and just harvested from the back. You can't even tell. Gosh, that's pretty, and the bees love it. Wonder if I have any borage that's still blooming. I do. Let's get some borage flowers while we're at it. Aren't they beautiful? They taste just like cucumbers. All right, got the whole thing filled up, so let's start on the top level here. We have got stevia and then the few little amethyst basil tops that I pulled. Next layer down are rosemary stems and calendula flowers. Isn't that so pretty? Next layer is the Italian parsley. Then we've got our sweet Italian basil. Then we've got a menagerie of things. In this level, we've got the tricolor sage. Let's see, it goes all the way back there. Then we've got thyme, and then the borage flowers, and then mint in the bottom level. So I won't be leaving this out here in the greenhouse. I'm gonna take it inside. You don't wanna store it somewhere like the kitchen where there's moisture in that room. Also like the cooking vapors or cooking smells that can kind of get in here. You just want to put it somewhere warm where there's good airflow. And then here in my area, I think I mentioned that all of this will probably be dry within the week. And then at the end of that week, I'll check on everything. If it doesn't seem dry, I'll give it a few more days. But if it does seem dry, I'll go in and individually take the leaves off. They actually keep better if you keep the leaves whole and don't crush them up to store them like you find them in the spice aisle. And then you put them in airtight jars. So just like canning jars, ball, you know, glass jars that have a lid on them, or little Tupperwares or whatever, something airtight. You do want to make sure you check on them though, especially for the first little bit. Make sure that if there's any extra moisture, if you see any condensation or anything forming on the inside of those containers, you need to dry them out a little bit more because you do not want mold to form. And then depending on the herb, you can get anywhere from 6 to 12 months out of your dried herbs, which is pretty amazing. So this will be kind of a fun experiment to see how everything dries, like to see if I have as good of luck with the mint and the basil as I do with the other things that are more dry anyway, thinner leaved, like the oregano and the thyme. And you know, I do have dehydrators, so if that's something that I feel like I need to do after this week is out, I think everything will still be nice out in the garden, and I can go harvest more and dry them that way if I feel like that's what I need to do. But you know, like I said, every climate's different, and I think it's just fun to experiment. If you want to try a way that's like kind of hands-off, where you're not using electricity, or you don't have a dehydrator or whatever, or you don't want to use the oven, this is just kind of an easy way. And I actually, like, so far, I prefer this way, like over bundling them. The look of bundled herbs, which I do have a drying rack that I got, I think last year or the year before. It's like a circular metal thing that has little hooks, and then you can make your bundles and hook the herbs to it. It looks super cool, but they tend to get a little bit dusty. Like, it's not a place where you want to actually store them. Like, you can hang them to dry and that's totally fine, but you still want to take those bundles off and put them somewhere protected so they're not getting dust. And we live in a very dusty area because it's so dry here all the time that that's something that I have to consider. So anyway, that is going to do it for this video today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you in the next one. Bye. Okay, I don't want to show you guys a bunch of this room because it looks pretty junky. I've got a bunch of stuff I've got cleaned, I got to put away, but this is where I'm going to hang it. Clearly, I'm not going to keep the light on in here. But I had these little hooks up here still from a light fixture, a grow light that I had suspended in this room because I was growing some stuff on this tabletop. So I thought, well, this is perfect. We don't really do much up in this room, so it can just hang here for a little bit while the herbs dry.